chapter 4 in Mark.
Yeah, where we were at
See-
in service.
Exactly.
We're
We'll see
keeping
how
up
far we
with the
get.
series.
Yeah, at some point we'll get a little off from Sunday, but it's kind of fun when it's close by. I can talk
Yeah.
about it a little bit more. Does somebody want to read for us?
I'll go ahead and read this time because these glasses focus a lot better than my contacts do. Again he began to teach beside the sea. Such a very loud crowd gathered around him that he got into the boat on the sea and sat there, while the crowd was beside the sea on the land. He began to teach them many things in parables. And in his teaching he said, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seed fell into good soil, and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing, and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And he said, Listen, everyone with ears to listen. Everyone with ears to listen." Yeah, okay. When he was alone, those who were around him along with the 12 asked him about the parables. And he said to them, "To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God. For those outside, everything comes in parables, in order that they may indeed look but not perceive, and may indeed listen but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven." And he said to them, "Do you not understand this parable? Then how will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word. These are the ones that on the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And these are the ones sown on the rocky ground. When they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy, but they have no root and endure only for a little while. Then, when trouble and persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And others are those sown among the thorns. These are the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth and the desire for other things come in and choke the word, and it yields nothing. And these are the ones sown on the good soil. They hear the word and accept it and bear fruit, 30 and 60 and 100-fold.
All right. Yeah, that's a good place to stop, I think. Yeah.
And I apologize for stumbling at the bottom of the page, but that is an awkward turn of phrase there. Let anyone with ears to listen. Let anyone with ears to hear listen.
Most cases where I think they're
Ears
trying to be
to hear,
really
listen.
faithful to the original text, even if the phrasing doesn't really work in English.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but I had to go a few times on that one.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a pretty powerful statement in general, which is it sort of names a reality that you can have someone standing in front of you giving you absolute wisdom and profound truth, but you can't hear it. You don't have the ears, you don't have the understanding, you're not ready to hear it, whatever it is. And to me, that's powerful because I think when I was much younger, I just sort of thought that there's like, I don't know. Yeah, if somebody stood in front of you and told something amazing, you'd just go, wow, cool, all the time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But clearly that's not true, you know.
I mean, the thorns thing and the persecution. I mean, we can listen to this and see ourselves at different points in our lives being in different roles here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we recently were hearing about the pastors who were being drowned out about how woke their lessons were, and it's like, this is coming straight out of Jesus' teachings. You're not hearing it because you're getting choked out by the thorns of the political climate at the moment. But at the same time, we ourselves can look back and think, when was it too inconvenient to do what Jesus would do what you would realize that Jesus would have done in the situation be?
Yeah, so I just watched this video of a history professor in Israel, and he's a high school history teacher. And the video is of him leaving the school and all of the kids, there were a bunch of boys from his class that were waiting for him outside, and they were hurling insults at him and following him because he dared to show a picture of a boy the same age as them in Gaza who'd been killed, and basically made him a human. So this was a human being who had a life. And just naming that felt to these boys like a threat, and like, and I think the teacher was even jailed for a while. And I just watched the teacher as he walked out with his hands in his pocket and this sort of like fixed smile on his face. Like he knew this was the reaction he was going to get, and he was willing to bear what was going to happen. That made me think, some people in this world have so much courage. And I don't know if the consequences were that hard, of someone waiting outside a door for me ready to like throw stones at me and yell and hurl insults at me and bring me into jail. Like, I've never been tested like that. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's it, John.
Darn it.
Yeah, glue.
Yeah.
So I it just really, when I hear this, I'm like, I've never had to experience this. So how would I know how I would react? That, not that I don't believe what I believe in my heart, but if I have to actually stand up and say something to a hostile audience, would I have the courage to do that? We're 4, looking at the parable of the sower.
Page 815.
We'll never know until we're tested.
Yeah.
And we may learn it more than once, and we may react differently different times.
And to add some credence to the kids who say, when we say, well, back in our day, the way that, our trials are not going to be quite the same as another person's trials.
Right.
The same stone may hit a person in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
It's easy to say, oh, well, I would understand that these people are people, but when you think what happened on October 7th, they're thinking what happened to their friends, their
Yeah.
relatives, and thinking, oh, I cannot possibly forgive.
Yeah.
Would I be able to forgive?
And also, if you've been told your whole life a group of people hates you and wants you dead, it takes a lot of work to have the courage to humanize them and have compassion for them.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it's easy for me across the ocean to go, well, they should do this. What the heck do I know? There's...
Yeah.
Who's the greatest example that did it, besides maybe Jesus, but
Yeah.
Mandela.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my
Yeah.
gosh. I mean, if you ever,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, and he did a good job of coming around after the apartheid had been disbanded, and he rose to power, and he did a good job of keeping his own power in check, bringing in the other side into the resulting government, and working out solutions that both sides could generally live with.
Yeah.
There's going to be exceptions in all cases, but
Compare what happened in South Africa, what happened in some other parts of Africa where
things fell apart.
there were some pretty bloody reprisals.
Yeah.
And, not kind of understandably, but
He had time to get disposed
Mm-hmm.
in jail for, how he could forgive all that deal. But he used that most negative time that a person would think of having in such a positive way
yeah.
it's just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the question I was going to ask you is, when you hear the word, that the seed is the word, what does that actually mean to you today?
I was thinking about that during your message today, and had kind of an insight. I gotta develop this more, because it just, why does God, why did Jesus speak in parables instead of giving people straight, which is threaded throughout Mark, of course, because it's so confusing. Why did he just tell people plainly, and why did he try to confuse them? But giving people a seed instead of giving them like a fully developed tree of knowledge, like here, this is it, this is the fully developed tree. No, I'm going to give you a seed instead. Then it grows inside them, and they own it. It's part of them, and it means something to them. They care about it. They've nurtured it. It's nurtured them too. It's sort of, the roots grow through you and becomes part of you,
Yeah.
and then it grows out of you and makes more seeds. And I start to think that maybe that's
Yes.
an interesting
rich.
metaphor. I don't know.
And if I can take that a little further, I'm guilty of lecturing a lot and trying to spell things out for my girls, saying, this is the way that things are. If you follow these steps, you can get to your what you're trying to do a lot more easily. But if you give them the high level, just the seed of this is your end goal, you can figure out how to get there yourself, then they can work out what it means for them, how they get to that point in a way that really works for them.
Yeah, it also feels very personal, right? That there's a seed for me and there's a seed for you, and our plant might even look a little different in how
Exactly.
it grows and what it looks like, and I like that sense of it's in you, so it's your treasure rather than, and it's something that other people can't really take away if you're nurturing it, if you're,
Key point there. If you're nurturing it.
yeah.
Okay.
Ooh, yeah.
We have to take care of ourselves. We can't be sitting there looking at pornography. We can't be doing all this stuff that's so harmful for ourselves, and then think that we're going to nurture good seed. You know, everything that we do, you know, how I talk and how I live can be two different ways, but I'm saying everything that we do, we have to try to make ourselves something that something can grow out of. You know, and you gotta understand, what is that a good thing I'm doing or not? You know.
Yeah, I just heard about, this might be weird, it's okay, because I'm into weird new agey stuff too. It's okay.
Here we go again.
Here we go.
Well, I'm
So-
sure that's what everybody said about Jesus too.
Yeah, a couple years ago, I was writing down, and I got this weird sentence. It was talking about the food you eat needs to match with the frequency of your body. I had no idea what that meant.
I don't either.
Right?
No.
Year later, this messages of frequency and calibrate yourself started coming in. Like every day I'm journaling, and it's like calibrate yourself to a higher energy. So then I realized there were books written about this, and there's foods have been tested for high and low frequency, and moods and have been tested. So when you're in a really bad mood, or you're cynical, or you're depressed, your wavelength literally is low. And when you're experiencing peace and joy and good happiness, your wavelength is really high. And then they tested foods, and guess which foods are really high? Fruits and vegetables, and the kind of stuff you're supposed to be eating. And the low,
With the Doritos.
the low frequency foods, the low are fried foods
Ice
and
cream.
meat and ice cream and alcohol.
Yeah.
And
Don't say that.
I know, right? I know. And so I've been sitting with this information and heard people talk about eating high frequency foods to support your own spiritual, like to keep you buoyed up, which is fascinating. I'd never heard that before. And that especially in the climate, we're like right now around the world, it's like someone's stirring the pot and all the low dense stuff is coming out, all this war and anger and corruption. It's all being And so the message I hear from so many different teachers is like you have to find within yourself time and space to nurture your own frequency, so you don't get sucked in by what the world's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're catchy either way. Like if your bad mood's contagious and your good mood's contagious. All this to say that recently I started getting hits that I needed to focus even more on what I was eating and what I was putting in my body so that I continue to support. And it's not this energy, because this energy I don't think comes from God. It was I think you're ready to pay attention to this now. I think you're ready for this, which is kind of what I was trying to show in the sermon. Is like plants the seeds and waits. Waits for you to be ready for
I
it.
like that idea that you brought in the sermon too about the seed, that it could sit for a long time and still work. Just like you can have seeds and sit in a little packet and they're still good
Oh, yeah.
years later.
Yeah.
It is ironic
Like
that
the seeds in the seed vault.
Yeah. I realize that the low frequency, high frequency is just a different way of looking at it, but it is ironic that the low frequency is has such a high frequency of occurring in this world, it seems.
Yes.
But anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's something that I've been on this journey too, is like doing things that are genuinely healthy for your body, mind, and soul always feel like you're going against the grain. Like you have to work, and at least I feel it takes effort to exercise regularly, to plan and eat healthy foods, to maybe not eat meat as much. Like you have to go out of your way to find time and energy to do this stuff, because what's easy and what's in front and what's cheap is not always what's good for us.
Because we build
Holy
habits.
cow.
Does that, what's cheap is not always good for us. I hear exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so you take a certain economical class of people, absolutely, who has been pressed down in the cheapness of the world, and wondering why we get the results not we get the results. The results are what they are. It's
Yeah.
real, it's unbelievable.
Not to go on a tangent, but there's something called food justice,
Yeah, absolutely.
which
Yeah,
is
like
which is
food justice.
Yeah,
What's that?
looking
She's
at
going to tell you.
poor communities where they don't have a Cub Foods filled with fruits and veggies.
Oh, I
They only have the Super America where they get, they really don't have.
Ding dongs.
Yeah, they don't have access to the good things, and they have to take public transit an hour one way and then back for their groceries. And so food justice is finding gardens and cooperatives so that people in inner cities and other places have access to fresh fruits and vegetables and know how to cook healthy foods, because it is a certain kind of oppression
Oh, yes.
to
It is.
deny people and make it so hard and so expensive for them to be able to do what's good for them.
And it's a good way to keep people where you want.
Yeah. That is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, shall we move on?
Yeah.
He said to them, "Is a lamp bought in to be put underneath the bushel basket or under the bed, and not on the lampstand? For there is nothing hidden except to be disclosed, nor is anything secret except to come to light. Let anyone with ears to hear listen." And he said to them, "Pay attention to what you hear. The measure you give will be the measure you get, and still more will be given to you. For those who have, more will be given, and from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away." The parable of the grow. So that kind of fits into what we were just talking about with the way things get baked in and snowball.
Go ahead. I'm missing what you're saying, Jacob. Sorry. Go back to what?
So this bit about for those who have, more will be given, and from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away, and that kind of rings true with our present economies. With those who have a lot, that they invest in the stock markets and they get dividends, and their stocks grow greater. And those who are at the low end of the economy, I mean, they have to spend every penny they got just to get food for themselves, and even then they need to get food stamps, so they don't have anything to save away for their life savings. And so,
And there's also a message here. This took me a long time because I thought, well, this seems mean of God. It's, again, not God actively doing something. There's certain like laws of the universe, right? Where this is a healthy relationship, an equal give and
yes.
exchange. And this is us to each other, this is us and the planet. It's a healthy giving and receiving. And when one side becomes lopsided, you know, there's a lot of pressure put on the one getting the least. But one of the things that is another sort of universal law is like you're given what you can handle in a way of like stewardship. And this may be not something that's even super visible. And if you're given wisdom and grace and love and you're a good steward of it, you just find more and more and more and more and more of it. Right?
okay,
It's like
yeah,
your heart opens, and once you like start accepting love, grace, forgiveness, knowledge, wisdom, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And those who don't have a lot of it and squander what they have, they're not going to be. Does that make sense?
Oh,
I think I see what
God,
you're saying. So
you know,
yeah.
God's gonna be like, all right, I'm just gonna wait for you to grow up a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Wait for you to grow up, and that's why there's like that sense of infinity. Love is infinite. Wisdom is infinite.
Yeah.
And once we're tapping into it, it's like drinking out of a fire hose, right? There's so much, but you have to be, what are you prepared for? What can you handle? And so some people, what they have, they throw away.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. It took me a while to get that out.
Really?
To me, it's more of
Look
a, like, you know, God gives us gifts. Okay, so we receive this gift. Okay, so say, maybe I have a gift of being a farmer. Okay, and so I take and then I grow this food and I give it away and I give it away, and then that person gives away his deal, and this whole thing grows, and then so all of a sudden I need something, and all of a sudden this guy, all of a sudden God sends this person around, you know, and there you are, just sitting there and holding on to whatever gifts we are, which are all different. There's no growth. There's no. Yeah. And I like this thing too. I like that. That's good too. But you better give it away, and you know.
Well, and it works this way too, that if you're receiving and then you give it back in a good way, you're creating room for that wavelength to get bigger. And that's the other thing that I've gotten in my journaling with this message. It's like when you expand within, this gets bigger and bigger, and you're able to receive more, but then you give more because that's
Yeah.
how it works.
Okay, that makes sense.
When all this energy is moving.
Okay, key word there. Given in a good way. Okay. And to me, that's right there. If you give this away because you're so grateful that you received this, or are you giving it away to show up somebody? You know, what is going to produce good fruit?
Yeah.
You know? I have to stop and think of every reason why I do something, because there's a lot of deviousness. There really is.
Yeah.
There is. You know, am I doing it for what? Why am I doing this? You know, and then to change it. Go, okay. Well, if I wanted to think a good way of doing it, it scares me.
Sorry, I got us off track there. So, again, moving on to the parable of the
keep
growing
going, it's
seed.
good.
He also said, the kingdom of God, as if someone would scatter seed on the ground, and would sleep and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow. He does not know how. The earth produces of itself first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. But when the grain is ripe, at once he goes in with his sickle, because the harvest has come. He also said, with what can we compare the kingdom of God? Or what parable will we use for it? It is like a mustard seed, which, when sown upon the ground, is the smallest of all the seeds on the earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs, and puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade. With many such parables he spoke the word to them, as they were able to hear it. He did not speak to them except in parables, but he explained everything in private to his disciples. On that day, when the evening had come, he said to them, let us go across to the other side. And leaving the crowd behind, they took with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, Who is this, that even the wind and sea obey him?
Peace, he said to the water.
Sometimes he calms the storm.
So I had this recent thought. To me, it's a very sort of masculine understanding that Jesus was like, obey me, water. And I recently had this thought that what if a more feminine understanding is that Jesus would go, hey, water, let's do this thing together. That Jesus had a conversation with the water, and the water responded. That it was more collaborative rather than showing dominance over nature.
Perfect.
I like that so much better.
That is much better.
I feel like a lot of language we have is, I mean, it's even in This is the Feast, which I'll just be honest with you, some of those words drive me crazy. Power, riches, wisdom, and
Yes.
might be to
Yeah.
you, God. And I'm like, who cares? You know, is that really the most important thing? It comes from the Bible, but
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're like have to say, God, you are the biggest, strongest God who can beat up all the other gods.
It's really
And I
hard to
don't-
shed that old Messiah kind of.
It doesn't work for me, and it's not that there's anything wrong with masculine theology, but it's gone unbalanced.
It's unbalanced, and when you look at the Old, I mean, a lot of this still comes from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
That thought that the Messiah was going to come as a lion and basically straighten things out on
Be
the
a bad
first
guy.
go. And what did our Messiah turn out to be? He was a teacher. He was an example. And the only time he really got aggressive is when the church was being misused.
With the religious leaders,
Yeah,
the ones in
exactly.
power. The ones
Became
in
a
power.
mama bear.
Yes,
very
good.
yes, I love that. I love that. Protective of the chicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is the shortest version of the Stilling the Storm
Yeah.
story. And I kind of like this one because what he says to it is, peace, be still. It's more like just calm down, it's okay.
It's okay. It's gentle. And notice that he was asleep.
Yeah.
I like that.
Uh-huh.
He was asleep
Had a long
and
day.
also not concerned with the things that the disciples were concerned with. And to me, that's a powerful metaphor for how we can have moments where we get really upset and anxious about what's going on in our life and feel like this is some really big storm. And we're like, Jesus, where are you? Why aren't you fixing this? And Jesus is like, oh, wait. Oh, this is scary? Okay. Let me come down and see what you're afraid of.
Well, it's easy to sleep through the exciting part of the movie if you already know how it ends.
Yeah, maybe. There you go.
I like
That's
Especially if
that.
you don't like the ending that's coming anyway.
Yeah.
Also true.
But I think he likes the end.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
also had a busy day, so
Yeah, busy day.
well,
That's
yeah,
true.
double people
Walking around a
wanting
lot.
to speak and such. I mean,
this is funny.
okay, another parable.
Jesus took naps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jesus slept.
Gotta be a lot of self care, you know.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
important.
Yep. Yep. Well, should we move on to 5? This is a really, really interesting
Oh
story.
yeah.
Which one is that?
Kirsten, do you want to read?
Sure. So we're on the next page now. Here we are.
Up there?
Number 5. They came to the other side of the sea,
Yeah.
to the country of the
Okay.
Gerasenes. And when he stepped out of the boat, immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him any more, even with a chain. For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him. And he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there on the hillside a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank to the sea and were drowned in the sea. The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had had the legion, and they were afraid. Those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and to the swine reported it. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed.
Beautiful story.
I always wondered if those people were Jews or not, since they had pigs.
This is so he tells them to go to the Decapolis, which would be Gentile territory.
Okay.
So he crosses to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes.
Yeah, I think this was outside of Jerusalem. I remember Pastor Scott showing a map at one point and the geography of
Where that is.
Yeah. And it was actually within the confirmation class.
So there's a couple different ways to interpret this story. There's like the fact that he calls himself Legion would have been a direct metaphor for the legion of Roman armies that's oppressing the land, right? So he's like almost like a metaphor. He's possessed. He's oppressed by these violent forces, this legion. And so Jesus casting the legion out into swine was like, yeah, hero story. People hearing this story would have thought this was like a really sweet story about getting rid of the Romans. But then there's so much more here. There's the fact that the people are afraid, and there's this interesting idea of like sometimes we get so used to the sickness of our culture and the sickness of the people we know that when they get well or when something starts to shift, it makes us afraid. And there's often sort of talk that like when you get well and you go back to your family of origin, they don't know what to do with you, right? Because that can be, there's so much pressure to go back to these are the roles we play. You're the sick one, I'm the good one, I'm the achieving one, you're the loser, and we all play our roles. And when somebody gets profoundly well or a system gets profoundly well, it can create an imbalance in the larger system that sometimes people subconsciously don't know what to do with.
Yeah. For a
Yeah, I
practical
think so.
perspective, too, they probably don't care that much about this one guy because he's obviously homeless. He's living in the cemetery. And they just lost 2,000 of their livestock. So as far as they're concerned, this weirdo Jew just showed up and killed 2,000 of their pigs. What are they going to eat? And now the crazy guy just came back from the cemetery and wants to live with them again. And so they're probably freaked out.
Another way to look at this, because clearly this guy grew up in their town.
Yeah.
So let's say that this is, a town that's small enough that people actually knew each other.
Oh, yeah.
So they would have seen this guy grow up, and at some point he started to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very possible that he was like a litmus test for what was going on in the larger world.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this with some kids who are very empathic and things like that. They need way more structure and help and boundaries in order to be able to take on life. And so we have people who, when they have mental health issues or a mental disorder, what's the right word? I'm not sure. We often want to blame them. There's something wrong with them rather than saying, you are correctly interpreting a sick society
Yeah.
and you are very affected by this sick society.
Mm-hmm.
How can
Very
we
true.
get you the help you want? And to me, I almost think that's an interesting idea that they allowed him to carry the sickness of the society and then chained him and cast him out rather than having any idea how to cure him and help him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And that idea of putting a sickness into a person, I think, would have been a very comfortable idea to that culture.
Mm-hmm.
More than to us.
One thing that jumps out at me on this is that what you were describing, that when a person gets well, there's people around there that have been getting a lot. It's just got AA written all over it to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think they might not have trusted him getting
But I'm not, that's, I really don't believe that that's where this is going, but your interpretation took me there. Whatever.
I'm thinking also, word of Jesus by this time has reached these outer areas too, and so when they saw this demonstration, like, oh, this is that guy. People in power are going to be like, we got to get rid of this guy before he kind of exposes us and starts threatening our power.
That's a good point.
And we know from current events that how easy it is for people in power to twist things around to kind of get the masses on their side.
That's been going on for a little bit.
Oh yeah, beyond my lifetime.
Yeah.
It's nothing new.
No, it's not. Same dance, different.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
And we already had in chapter 3 them asking questions about doing things on the Sabbath, so they were already
Yes.
on 'em.
And these groups in power tend to establish their chains, their associations, even with those that they don't outwardly agree with. Watch out for this guy.
so I'm going to mention this on Sunday because this is Sunday's text. I'm studying internal family systems theory, which was created by a psychotherapist 40 years ago. And it's the idea that within you are many parts. And the parts all have different jobs, and they're all, whether they know it or not, whether you know it or not, they're there to help you. But they have different methods. The part that says, you go, well, one part of me wants to go on a diet because I know that's good for me, but another part wants to eat that cake. That's kind of real. And he discovered this by accident when he was working with girls who had eating disorders and were cutting themselves and things like that. And he thought that these parts of them, he was like, well, let me talk to that part of you that wants you to hurt yourself. And he was trying to cast it out, and he was trying to do all these things, like to say, oh, you're a bad, shame it, blame it. It didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't work. It got worse. And it wasn't until he gave up and he's like, all right, I can't win against you. You know, I can't make you stop hurting this person. And it said, I'm not here to win. And then he got curious and he really listened and he realized that in their own way, in their own maybe messed up logic, this part was doing something that was helping them. And in one of the people, for example, had so much childhood trauma that they could distract themselves from the pain of that trauma by cutting themselves or by purging or whatever it was. It was helping in its own way. And once he figured that out, he could start to find these really extreme parts and gain their trust and then see who they're protecting. What little wounded part are they protecting? And when that part gets healed, it doesn't have to do its job anymore. And so I was thinking of that when I was reading this story, and I thought in another way, you could almost see Jesus coming with such calm and presence. And this person who's being tormented by what we would call demons, but it could very well be these parts that are there's so much trauma in this person that these parts are doing extreme behaviors. And Jesus has a conversation with them and does some sort of healing where they don't have to do their job anymore. They're relieved of duty, right? And so then what's left is a whole healed person that other people don't know what to do with. And that's a whole nother way to look at it. And what's so cool about this, like what's profound about this work, is he said he's talked to parts that swear they're the devil, that say, I am here to kill this man. I am the devil. And he's like, all right, tell me why. And he just greets them with patience and calm. And over time, they get disarmed. But it's never done with, "Begone, ye devil," which is what we've been taught our whole lives, right? How do you
Peace, be still.
Yeah, how do you confront evil? Fie on you! And he's like, I've tried that. He says, I've taught thousands and thousands of people, from child molesters to murderers to people who are hurting themselves, hurting other people. It's always a part that is covering up a deep trauma. And you're not going to know what it's covering up and why it's doing what it's doing. And it's never been listened to. It's never been listened to. In fact, the other parts within it have demonized it. But it's not going to give up its job because it's keeping this person together. Isn't that crazy?
That is
No,
fascinating.
no.
I would love to know that book.
I think
That was,
Yes!
that's
Yeah.
good.
I think once you, it's like us when we have this phobia in ourselves, like mine was with my dyslexia and stuff like that, you know, and I'd get all like that. But once I could call it what it was and bring it out, then it lost its power.
Whoa.
Naming it.
Name it.
Yeah,
Name it. Yep.
yeah.
Names have so much power.
So my spiritual director's trained in this IFS theory as I'm taking the class. She does a lot of IFS on me. So if there's something that's bothering me, it just keeps cropping up, I bring it to her and she's like, okay, let's talk to that part. So we have a conversation, and I got to tell you, you don't know logically. You don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And it's amazing the stuff I have found out about myself and how these parts are really trying so hard to help me X, Y, and Z. And even if they're doing it wrong, right? That's the only way they know how. And if I listen to them, truly listen to them, like I'm sometimes very surprised by why they're doing what they're doing. And how it's linked to things I didn't think it was linked to. It's beautiful and it's gentle and it's compassionate. And to me that way makes way more sense than big on fire, this sort of like fighting energy.
That's fascinating.
And I almost want to like rewrite this scene to imagine what it would be like if Jesus approached this person and it was more of an IFS encounter. It would just be minor adjustments.
When you talk about these different parts, I think when certain person gets, one part gets too hyper, it's too much. All of a sudden, it's a good thing, but it's all of a sudden inflamed or something like that. It's taking over, and then it's got to be calmed down. It's like you're talking about the cake thing. Cake's good. It's okay to. Marie is not afraid to eat the last cupcake
Yeah,
because she's healthy.
yeah,
You know, she's not afraid to.
yeah.
You know, and you know,
And that's the thing, is that you can have these
Certain
two parts. Let's go with that same thing. Sometimes neither of them is wrong, but because the culture has said, hey, you have to eat healthy and be thin, I've demonized the part of me that wants to help me relax and enjoy the good things in life. And it's not until I sit and listen that maybe these parts that have been fighting each other all of a sudden, kind of in marriage counseling, they all of a sudden realize they're both trying to help me in different ways. And then they both relax. And so then I feel less guilty when I'm eating the cake, and I also feel more motivated to eat healthy because I'm not being pulled by these internal forces. I'm understanding they're both trying to help me. They just have different goals for me. One genuinely wants me to enjoy the pleasures of life.
yes.
And one genuinely says, we have to be here a long time, Siri. We have to be here, we have a lot to do. And
So
I'm
what
like,
do you do with that? You learn how to enjoy yourself in a good, healthy way.
and I say thank you to both of them because they're
Absolutely.
both trying to help me. I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff. We're not taught this. And we're not taught to look at ourselves with that much compassion. And then too, when I see people who are acting crazy, I'm like, they just have a firefighter that's taken over that's trying to help them. I need to back off and have a little compassion for them because something's going on. Something's happening inside that person I don't understand.
They're just having a day.
They're having a day.
There are blessings to certain things. You have a nervous breakdown, and it is a blessing what you can come out of a nervous breakdown scene. You know, you take whatever you study, learn, whatever you do, all these things that you're learning about and that, and you feel and you go, wow, that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Can be.
You know?
Ben, you haven't said much. You want to give us the last word?
It's a listener, he's smart. Smarter than me.
No, these are the tough ones that, you know, you read for decades and you just wrestle with. And a lot of these, like, I've always just kind of, I mean, you don't see this replicated today in any way. So I like what you say about there's some more holistic and, like, psychological basis for this encounter that's not casting out an unclean spirit, as they would, because, like, that just doesn't
Yeah.
resonate in any way. And so, like, what he says earlier, like, you know, the seed sprouts and grows and he does not know how. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the kingdom of God, because you don't see anything that makes any sense in the world, and nothing is
Yeah, that's true.
fair, and it seems like it's going in the wrong direction, and you're like, I don't know what to do. And if
Yeah.
there was a just and caring God, you'd think he'd be like putting his thumb on the scale somewhere, and you're like, why aren't you doing that? And why are you letting all this stuff happen? And just the classic, like, yeah, there's evil in the world, but who knows? But I don't know. Like, just the way we get healed is interesting, I guess, and like the way that happens. I just think, like, this summer my mom was telling me that, my grandma's like 92 or something, and super healthy, and like never had any real health problems, and she's like saying that she's had like severe back pain for like I can't even move, like 2 days. Like, did you do anything? No. But like my whole back hurts, my neck hurts, my head hurts. And my mom's like, well, like, what's going on? And she's like, I don't know. I'm in a lot of pain. And she's like, well, a year and a half ago, my uncle, her son, died suddenly. Last spring, a year ago, my cousin died. Her brother died. Whatever, all this stuff happened. And she's like, have you ever dealt with that? And this is a lady who was probably in an unhealthy marriage for 50 years and just stoically just was like, you just grin and, you move on and, And like, after that, she's like, and then she called me 2 days later and said, I've been crying for 2 days. And I let it all out, and now it's gone. The pain's gone.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And it's like she has never, like, confronted all the terrible things that had happened this year. She just...
Yeah.
It was amazing. Like, she got up and, like, was the first person to speak at my cousin's funeral, and was just like... Well, this happened. It's a bummer. Like, this is horrible. This is the worst thing ever. And she's just like, he's just a troubled kid. And, it's like, yeah, that's true. But, like, she just wasn't grieving. And she just was like, all right, going back to Florida. And you're like, okay.
Sometimes it takes a bit,
And then it just hit her. And it's like, wham. It's like the body just can't handle these things. And it's like, like, like you said, there's devices that are keeping you aligned or whatever. And that was it for her. So, yeah, I don't know.
Floodgates opened and it all came out.
Yeah, because I think a lot of us are trained to have a part that keeps us a little bit numb because it's terrified.
Yes.
If I let go, the amount of grief that comes out, we can't handle it, which
Right.
isn't true, but it doesn't know that.
Yeah.
It's okay because these parts aren't always enlightened, but they're sure trying to help.
Yeah.
And yet there would be another part that's literally aching to come out. And so it manifests
Gotta
in
keep it
pain.
together. Gotta keep it together.
And then finally that's so fascinating.
Amy does that. Or she'll say, I can't cry. I can't cry. Until all of a sudden she'll just be crying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So these, he talks about talking in parables. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all are so different.
Yeah.
So this is what we're doing here is everybody's looking at this thing differently, 100% differently. Is this parable is not supposed to say the same thing to everybody?
No.
By no means. And if he said A, B, C, D, that would be the same to everybody, But this isn't, and thank God he gives us this that we can come to it at where we are at this time, and what position we're in, and you study this in a year from now. Wow! If you take your notes
Yeah.
from a year ago and go like this, or when you're in a different place, you're gonna go,
Yeah.
is that the same parable? Yeah.
That's the brilliance of the parables is that you can look at them in a million different ways, and that's why stories are so profound for us. The archetypes of characters, it just hits so deep on so many levels. I think that's a great point.